Great. Well, welcome to the latest support chat, and this one's entitled, What Do I Need to Know to Get Started? It's kind of a tricky title because really what we say is you really just get into the program to get going, and there isn't a lot to know that you really need to know. You can kind of learn by discovery, but there is a lot of features under the hood, or a lot of features, and so this session is really to kind of walk you through the basics and then some more advanced stuff so you have a greater perspective of what you can accomplish, and then you can look at our help material documentation or just kind of walk through it yourself as you learn to use the more advanced features. So I'm going to lay out here an agenda. Again, this is something that some of the things that we see a lot of the customers wanting to learn. First, just the basics using the new Edit Play. Then, of course, where you can actually get further support, whether through videos and documentation. And what I should mention as well is we're going to be recording this session. So after this session, which I think we're aiming at about 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes, you will be able to then refer to it online in our webinar archives. So after the basics, after we get through just how you create something fairly simple, where you can get support to learn how to use the program more, then we can mention a couple of the more intermediate advanced options, things that are available when you're editing scenarios, things you're available when you're playing them, things like multiple locations, copying sims among the different platforms, as Paul had mentioned, the different from mobile to desktop or desktop to desktop, timing, masking, condition progression, victim control, and we're going to really suggest where you can find out more about this. I'll show some of that information so you can see it in action, but in our time right now we're really trying to focus on the essentials to get you started. So what I'm going to do now is to open up SimsUshare and get right started. Now, just for people who may have different platforms, the Windows, Mac versions are essentially the same. The iPad, iPhone, and Android, the mobile versions, are virtually the same as the Windows and Mac app. There's just a couple differences. On the Windows and Mac program, there'll be this runner panel at the bottom. I'm now hovering over that. And inside this panel is where you'll have the back key. In Windows and Mac, you can create multiple windows we'll get into and go into full screen mode and even exit. On the mobile devices, they have their own buttons for that. Even on the Windows and Mac, one of the first things that you might want to find out, even though you can click on the back button essentially to go back to the last screen, you can also use your left arrow key to go back to the same screen. So if I, let's say, go into New here, I don't have to pull up this thing here and hit back all the time. I could just go here and press my left arrow key on the keyboard, and it goes back a screen. So keyboard shortcuts is something we will also be going over briefly. So in terms of just a quick tour, the 1-2 minute tour, the easiest thing here, when you want to create a scenario, you click New. When you want to edit an existing one, you hit Edit, and you just want to play a scenario, you hit Play. So if we went to New here, on the Windows and Mac version, we don't have a camera on here, so we're not given the option for a camera, only on the mobile version. I enter my sim name, let's say example 1. I select a photo from the disk. I'm just going to go here and select a photo, and there it shows up. Now I'm actually in the edit mode. So if I had gone back, let's say I was editing my scenario, I'm going to use the back arrow key. If I now had finished and I want to get back to that scenario, I click on Edit. I'm given a list of all my sims. Another thing here, sometimes people are confused about on the Windows and Mac, is this is a little scrolly menu. So if you have more than 10 or so sims, they may be located beneath here, and you have to click and drag to scroll up to them. I'm going to click on EX1. Typical things here when you're editing, you can edit it or double click. You can clone or copy, or you can delete it. This button over here lets you change the order if you wanted to reorder them for whatever reason. And there's a quick menu up here also to alphabetize them if you wanted to alphabetize all your simulations. So I'm going to go as a sort of quick tour into Edit. Now I know that I'm editing the scenario because it'll tell me editing EX1. That's my scenario. I have a couple buttons here. This is the Add New Element. This is the Play Sim. So I know that I'm at this top level here of editing when I have New Element and Play Sim. I'm going to add an element, let's say some smoke, I'll just put some auto ignition smoke here, and you can see I use the menus to navigate and add. I'm now right over here. I'm using the first step when you add an element is this yellow highlight tells you can scale or you can rotate. Those are the options here. You may also find a couple other options in the menu, which we'll go over a little later. But that's essentially it. You can scale and rotate your element. Now, that gives you its position. When I'm done editing this element, I press the Done button. And we're back at that Editing EX1. Now you'll notice if I know that I'm able to change the element when I click on it, and you'll see the title here changes to Editing Element, Auto Ignition 1. That's what this thing is going to be called, because you can have multiple things, multiple smoke and fire. So these buttons will change. There's no longer the plus sign. So once I add that smoke in there and I hit Done, and now, as simple as it is, that might be a scenario that I'm happy with. It might be just something very simple, quick and dirty. I get to put something up on the TV or onto the wall, and I'm using that for training. There's a lot more, obviously, with SimsUshare than that, but when you're starting out, you may want to make a lot of very basic scenarios just to get the hang of the interface, the mechanics, and, of course, there's no need to make things very complicated if they don't have to be. This just will continue going on indefinitely. When you're actually playing here, you'll see that in the menu on the top right, you can actually take a snapshot. You can pause the sim. You can restart. You can resume the sim. You can reset it. That will happen when that'll be more useful when we add timing. We can also hide menu. So if you notice this sort of floating orb over here isn't very aesthetically pleasing, I can actually click here and hide the menu, and now it disappears, even though in reality it's still under there. See, if I still click there, or in the case of the back button, I can hit back and it will take me back to the last screen. So it will remember that setting, and that way it won't be so distracting to have the menu sitting up there. Now you'll notice also that the runner is still over here, and you can size your photos to get them into the right frame. Let's go back into the editing part right here. Now, I showed you when you're changing the scale, essentially making it bigger or smaller, you just click on the element here, and then you get this slider at the bottom, which lets you make it bigger or smaller, and you can click and drag it around. Well, you also see beneath it is this pencil. And if you click on the pencil, this is how you change characteristics of whatever you put in there. So the characteristics of this effect, I have brightness, opacity, changing a color, speed, transform, which is flipping it, shrinking it, things like squeezing it, and a delay timing. So if I click on any of these, let's say brightness, now again the familiar slider shows up, and I can just click and drag and make it in brightness situation darker or lighter. If I wanted to change another one without going back into the regular edit where you're editing any element, you can see I just can click this on and off. So if I click over here and I say let me change the opacity, I can make the opacity less. Now you'll see some light lines, light white lines beneath it. That just gives you some lining up information. Those have no special purpose other than to give you a perspective on how straight the thing happens to be. If I want to go back to the changing size, I just go and size, rotate, things like that. And so once I'm done with the changes, I hit done, and I can go and add some more stuff. For example, let me add some fire. I'll just add, let's say, go to all fire. I'll go to basic fire, and let's say I'll just add something over here. And again, I'm just moving, scaling up and down easily enough like that. I can rotate, and then now with the fire again, the fire has its own set of characteristics. Again, brightness, opacity, color, speed. I wanted to speed that up, slow it down. Now, if I wanted to go back to edit the smoke, I just click on the smoke thing there. And I can go here and go back to the pencil, opacity, set that up to where I want. If I want that to be faster, I go to speed and set that up to go much faster. So this is what you're going to be spending your time kind of adjusting the speed and adjusting the characteristics of your elements. Not maybe way too fast, but that gives you a sense of how you adjust your elements. Now, once you have more than one element. Yep, Jim?
No, Paul, I'm sorry.
Oh, Paul, yep.
Jonathan, I'm completely up to speed with everything you've done so far. I've been playing around with it for quite a while. When you were on the edit single element before, one of the, and I know I saw it as a bullet point too, but just to touch on it right now, where you are already in the single element, the timing. That's where I'm really getting hung up with as far as the timing of trying to like start things off and have a progression, have something small that builds, and knowing how to add elements on top of elements that would look like a natural progression of a fire.
Good question in terms of timing. So that's, as you were talking about here, when you click on this, one of the elements here is delay timing. And so here's you have the option to do fade in, fade out, the fade in and fade out, and fade in duration. So one of the things I want to show right before the timing, before I get here, is when you click on an element, you'll notice as well there's this little order thing on the left, on the bottom left. This actually changes the visual order of your elements. So if I click, right now I'm on the fire, and if I click below, if you notice the fire is now beneath the smoke. So I click above, it will go above the smoke. So this is the way to change back to front ordering. Now that can be useful when you have many elements and you want to get them visually correct. For example, if you had smoke on the roof, if I wanted to put some smoke, let's say I'll put some laminar smoke, but I want it to be beneath the other things here, but I've added it later, I can just basically go here and drop it beneath my other elements. So now if I'm done with that element, I'm done with it, I don't want it anymore, I use the X to get rid of it. So that was a little bit.
Paul, again, does that take the place of masking, or is it separate than masking?
Yeah, so Paul's question about whether it's different from masking, this is actually, masking is about, what we'll get into, is about hiding certain parts of the scene. This really just says the relative order. So if I actually show you, let me do that one again to show you, I didn't mean to get rid of it. So quickly, so this one here, when I have the relative order, it just means that it's going to be relatively beneath it. It's not going to cut off any part of the smoke or fire unless that were hidden. So if you were doing something that everything was completely hidden, like over here, you could sort of say, well, I don't need to mask. I don't need to block off the laminar because the other element's there. But in reality, masking would be for cutting off parts where you don't want to see it, and this one is just relative relative to the viewer. Do you want it forward or back? And you can move that around. So the other thing here, which is a kind of a, people find it interesting, it's not so obvious. How do you actually click on? If I click on this element, I'm getting to the front one here, and no matter how much I try, I still can't get back to that one beneath it. Now I could move this aside. This is what people will do in the start, and then click on it. But now I've changed my whole picture, and when I'm done with it, I have to move this back. We have something here called, when you're at the when you're just at the regular editing here, called the selection rotator. And if you click on the menu and say Show Selection Rotator, a new button will show up. And in future versions, this is actually going to be a default when you have more than 2 elements, like we have now. Now the Selection Rotator lets you click through. If I'm clicking now each time, click through all the different elements. And that way, like with that laminar smoke I had in the back, I don't have to try and move the front smoke away. I can just wait until the laminar smoke is there, click on it, and now you'll notice editing element gray laminar. So I'm editing the background smoke even though I'm seeing the foreground over here. So you'll see if I go and edit that, and let me just change the color, set the color to something so it's really obvious. I'm going to set it to like a bright green. I'm going to increase the intensity. So you'll see that I'm actually right now, when I'm editing, I'm moving that around even though the other stuff remains in place. So that selection rotator is really useful to grab stuff behind other things without upsetting the balance. Now sometimes, like you might be, you want to actually see stuff behind these other elements, that's blocked by the elements. That's what the switch down here, hide other elements. If I click hide other elements, it will take away, it'll make the others invisible momentarily. So now I can actually place this. If I had something important like masking, or I need some very fine detail, I could get rid of the other elements just for the moment until I turn it back on, as a way to, for more precise editing. It's easier for me to see that directly. Now of course those elements don't disappear, so when I hit play, they're still there. But that selection rotator is an important feature there. So this kind of roundabout gets me to the timing. I'll kind of go ahead since Paul has asked that question. When you actually have, let's say I started with that green smoke, but I want to now bring in the smoke and fire. What I can do is let's say I'm going to bring in the smoke, and I'm going to say, when I'm clicking, so now I know I'm editing that smoke, and I do delay timing. And I'm going to say fade in, and now fade in when means after how many seconds since this whole scenario started do I want to fade this thing in. Now I'm going to just say like 3 seconds. So now if I actually play this, I'll be going 1, 2, 3, and there it shows up. Now if I want to actually have it fade in gradually, what I can do here, that's the other option within the fade in menu. If I click on this, you'll see here delay timing had fade in when, which was the 3.3, and fade in duration is how long should it take once it starts appearing to be fully to be fully opaque or fully set. So fade in duration right now, so it's going to, let's say I'm going to set that to be about 2 seconds, which means that it's going to start coming in at 3 seconds, 3.3, and 2 seconds after that, it will have completed a sort of a transition from invisible to visible. So let's see what that looks like. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense now.
Okay, so it's again one of the non-obvious types of things here. So we have 3, and you see how it sort of gradually fades in. And so that's also how you can actually do the. So you can actually have fade-ins be longer, though the pause and reset may not faithfully reproduce the exact moment at which it's fading in.
Sorry, Jonathan, Paul.
Yeah, sure.
But the time starts from when you select your fade-in time. It doesn't overlap that. That's the starting time, so then it would be the duration after that if you want progression of several elements within one, say, window.
That's going to be, so your fade-in time here, so I go here and say my fade-in time, fade-in is going to be when the thing is supposed to start. And now this is going to be a manual process, right? Yet we don't have a better way to coordinate a lot of these things. You have to manually say things are going to start at 3 or 5 or 7 seconds. Now, another question people have is, what happens here if I want to fade it in beyond 30 seconds? See, if I get the slider, all it goes is a 30. What I can do here is I can go and say instead of 30, make this 60 seconds. So I can type in a number. And now it won't, so now if I go over here, 60 seconds, now I shouldn't have hit done here, but we have here, let me go back, and I'm going to say to fade in duration. So remember, fade in duration is once you hit that fade in when time, which we put at 60, how much time does it go from invisible to its full opacity? So if I say now, let's say 10 seconds, wherever that is, there's 10 seconds. Again, I can change the time by clicking here if it's and typing if it's 10's not enough time. So if I go right now and I hit play, I'm going to sit here for 30 seconds for 60 seconds. What I can do here, and we had a little bug in the current version, in the next version it will correct it about scenario time, but if I set the scenario time here, let me set this. This is the way I can advance the time. Let's say you have a long scenario, you don't want to wait for minutes and minutes for things to come in. I can set this up to be 55 seconds. So now we're at 55 seconds, and in a couple seconds here we'll start to see, we should start there. Now we start to see the thing come in.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a great feature.
So that's sort of, hopefully, does that give you a sense of how that works, Paul, and that timing? It's manual.
Absolutely, yeah. My confusion was, aside from remembering to write down the times as I go through each element, then I forget where I started.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Was the confusion as far as like the duration versus the time, but now I understand that the fade-in time is the starting of it, and the duration, so if you say 10 seconds, that means that it will take 10 full seconds for it to get to its full effect. That makes so much sense.
That absolutely. So so now I won't go in right now until later, but the fade out works exactly the same. Normally it's set so there's no fade out. That's why it's not put here. But if you wanted to fade it out, like you had some initial condition you wanted to take back and later in the scenario, you just click on fade out, and now when you go back in here, you'll see it, you get a fade out when and a fade out duration, the same thing like you had, and it works the same way. So that's kind of how you can bring in an effect and really take it out, so have it fade out. And if you don't want fade out, you can then just say no fade out and it goes back. So
the fade out could be used, like say it was a knockdown and now all of a sudden you're not going to see anything emanating from that opening anymore.
Yeah, that's right, or that's right. And so now with the timing, all the scenarios are exactly the same. So I mean, based on the time. So that and this is when the time is when you start the scenario. It's not necessarily when I'm looking at the current picture. You can add multiple locations to so you can have walkthroughs and everything. You can set up your timing, for example, that at 30 seconds on the Charlie side, the smoke starts or it fades out. If no one ever gets to the Charlie side, or if they get there before, they won't see it. So it's when you do your timing, it's all based on the current scenario time, how long it's been playing, not on the time you're looking at the current picture.
Gotcha.
So we've kind of gone over some of this here in terms of playing here. I've gone over as well the idea of set scenario time, which is useful when you have longer scenarios that you want to jump to, the menus and things like that. Now the key thing with all of this is there are a lot of things that the program can do, and we try to. I'm now going over to show you my my browser here. We do have a lot of help topics here off of SimsUshare.com. So if I go to help, you can see here I have a little couple series of things that getting started, some things to do, frequently asked questions, a knowledge base and forum, video documentation, of course our webinars here. So for example, the knowledge base here, which is off of support.simsushare.com, you could say here, let's see if we have anything, fade in, I'm not sure. So here's how does fade in, fade out work when I have multiple locations, and things like that. You know, how can I advance the time? So in the support area, a lot of it is text. We also, let me go back over here to show you in the main, let's see, once it loads over here, let me go back into here. If I just clicked on help, videos and documentation, you'll see here, here's a bunch of videos, and it'll link over to our YouTube channel as well. And it will also have, as I scroll down here some more, the complete documentation as a PDF file. So you can, if you need more information, you want to sort of read about that, or if you're having trouble sleeping, check out our help section and the documentation can work for you. So a lot of stuff here in terms of helping. Of course, you can always reach out to us, and that's where contact us. Just click and email us, call us, however we can help you. So that really goes through a little bit more than the basics. Let me go back to our agenda here to see what we're going to showing. Yep. So Paul, do you have any comment?
No, I was just apologizing for being off.
No, that's part of what we're doing here with this. We call it the sort of webinar to do this, but it's the idea is to be responsive, and so we appreciate your time in coming in here, and we want to make sure your questions are answered. So you have a good sense of the fade in, fade out. In terms of this list here, I certainly can go through some of our other stuff that we have, but do you have any kind of immediate things that you'd like to hear about, Paul, since you're here?
Well, actually, I don't want to hijack your forum, but what you've gone over more or less, I'm comfortable with what you talked about, and I understand a little bit better clarification-wise the fade-in, fade-out scenarios, things like that. I'm having a lot of trouble with the walk-arounds with the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta.
Okay.
Different views of the building. And I also, I don't know if you're taking suggestions, but I had a suggestion that you might consider integrating into future versions.
Absolutely. Certainly. What's the suggestion? Because
the suggestion would be for some type of way to bring up what I envision using this a lot for is actually teaching guys how to use a pre-fire plan
Mm-hmm.
to on an actual incident,
Mm-hmm.
and then having the incident progress, and so it would be nice to be able to have some way to attach a document to this, or to edit a document that would be your pre-fire plan, that would give you your size of the building, where your FTC is, things like that. Additional information that if you're going through a true scenario with somebody and you're trying to ascertain their knowledge of their first due area.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. A great suggestion. Thanks. I'll note that down. What I'll go into right now is in the locations to hopefully set that up. And we do actually have another video about, I don't know if you checked it out from a webinar about doing locations. And that'll spend 30 minutes on it. So I'll kind of go over it here and then just briefly. And then certainly you can look there or give us a call if there's other other specifics that you're having trouble with. So
okay, I hope I'm not hijacking this. Jim is not.
Jim, are you on board with this? How are you? I guess he's going to unmute his microphone.
Yes, Jonathan, I am. We're going through a tropical storm here, so I'm just keeping it quiet since I don't have a microphone set up.
Oh, okay.
But by the way, it's heading your way.
Thank you.
On the East Coast, we're waiting until tomorrow and the 4th.
Oh, terrific. Okay, we'll be looking forward to it. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate you sending a little gift. So let's just go. What I'll do over here is let's create a new scenario, and I'll show you the multiple location aspects. So I'm going to go here and say I'll call it House 1, and I'm going to just select. Let's say I've got a and I'll just do the basics, Paul. Maybe you can help me understand where you might be getting hung up. Let's say I've got my setup over here. Now I use the new location thing over here. I'm in my edit. I say new location, and I say, let me say like Bravo side. So I said Bravo. I can now select the background for Bravo, and I go back, select my photo, and I'll just see. I think this is my Bravo side here. And now there's in this list over here, it says copy initial list locations assets. That's if I already had smoke and fire, which is a good idea to do all your alpha stuff initially, and it will then automatically copy. If you click on this, it'll copy any smoke and fire over to your Bravo side. I don't have anything particular here, but you could do that. If you actually didn't even set the background, it would copy the background picture. And you might want to do that if you were doing like a alpha initial, alpha free burn. You create a new location for the alpha advanced, but you don't need to set a new background for it. It's just the original. So once I set the background, I create it, and I assume that's okay, Paul, where you created a background. Okay. Now the trick here is I'm going to create another location just so we have this here. I'm going to just add in my Charlie. And I'll add in my Charlie, and I'll add in Delta as well. I create it, and I'm going to go here, new location. I'll create my Delta here, and I could certainly do interiors or whatever as well. But for right now, I'm just going to be doing this. I don't need a copy
yet. All this, where my problem comes in is now when you set the navigation buttons.
Yep. That's it.
I seem to be screwing it up. Like I'll hit the Bravo side and the picture isn't, or I'll set corners. I'll try to set corners. Yeah,
and I know this is a typical thing. This is once I show this, you'll see it'll make a lot of sense. It makes a lot more sense now if I start on Delta here, okay. And if I go on Delta, so you want to set the navigation. So navigation you use to set navigation. Now these arrows here are based on your current location. You see, set navigation for Delta. So a lot of times people think, and rightly so, this could be a fixed location, like the top is Charlie, the bottom is Alpha, and so on. But these actually are based on the current location. It's not a fixed position. So if I'm at Delta here, what I want to do is I want to set left to go to Alpha, and I want to set right to go to Charlie.
Oh, okay.
So that's the key insight there. And so if you were thinking about this as fixed positions, you might think this is always Delta and the left is always Bravo. But this is the key thing here is set navigation for the current location. And what this lets you do now is you can now, instead of having 8 locations, if it were fixed, now you can have any number of locations, because each location you're at can set its own navigation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, could you just do that one more? I apologize.
Sure.
Can you do
Yeah,
that
no.
one more time?
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to another view here. So I'm going to hit done, and I'm at Delta. Let me go over to, I'm going to go over to my Bravo side,
Yeah.
and I'm going to do set navigation. So at Bravo, which one would go to the right? So I click on.
3 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the right here, and alpha is going to be, and I'm calling initial location, but so I click on that one, and I hit initial location. And so again, I'm at Bravo, so the 9 o'clock left from Bravo should go to Charlie.
Hold on, wait, so the initial location is the 3 o'clock location, looking at the thing, looking at your, whatever you want to call this, your navigation.
Oh, no, it's actually, so the initial think about these as a bunch of just slides that are unorganized. We're calling it alpha, bravos, whatever. And these arrows here are not fixed to a location. So let me also show you a little trick here as overall. If I wanted to change the name of a location, what I can do here is go here to Manage Locations.
Okay.
And instead of an initial location here, this is where I set the initial one. And I can actually go and change it. If I wanted like an arrival one, I could go here and set a different one as initial. But I can rename the location here. So if I rename, instead of initial location, let me call this one alpha. Okay, and so now I'm going to go back here. So now I'm editing Bravo. So let's look at, so that way a little bit clearer rather than alpha, initial. So let's say I was editing Bravo, and now I'm going to go into set navigation. And I'll just show you here to get rid of an arrow. Let's say you wanted to get rid of one. You click on the arrow and press remove this path. And click on the arrow and press remove the path. So now we're at Bravo. So there is no fixed place for alpha necessarily. We haven't fixed a place. We're at the Bravo picture, and if we want to go, so we're thinking about what arrows make what sense. So if we want to go left from Bravo,
You want to go left?
left from Bravo, that should take us to Charlie. Does that make sense?
Yes, now it does. Yeah.
And if we want to go back to alpha, we might do, so if we're at the Bravo, we do right and we go to alpha. So you decide really what these arrows mean. That's the long and short of it. That they're not set up for us, and you can use whichever arrow you want to go wherever you want, even duplicate
I always
place.
thought that 12 o'clock was alpha, or Charlie rather, your 6 o'clock was alpha.
Yeah.
I thought it was like you were looking at the house and that was an overlay of the house.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, and that was one makes perfect sense to do it like that. We decided to do it where you had these, where the arrows were relative, because then you could have any number of navigations. I mean, instead of making it fixed that always go to the top. If we fixed it that let's say 12 o'clock was always Charlie or 6 o'clock was always alpha,
Yep.
then it would make sense when you had 4 sides or 8 sides. But if you wanted to now do navigation through buildings or some irregular structure, it could be more confusing. So you're absolutely right. It's a plausible way to have it, but we decided to go these relative arrows. So rather than so it can be tricky. The other thing, which is what's happening here, you notice it says reciprocal navigation.
Yes.
What this means is that when I set an arrow, like I set this one to go to Charlie, so I'm going from Bravo to Charlie. When reciprocal navigation is set to yes, which is a default, it automatically sets the opposite arrow to come back to Bravo. So if we actually go look at Charlie's side, so over here we set Bravo left goes to Charlie. If I hit done here and go over to the Charlie side, and now I look at the navigation for Charlie side, it actually has, it has the right arrow going back to Bravo. We didn't have to set that up because it had the reciprocal. When we did the thing before on the Delta side, we also went to we had set Delta right goes to Charlie, and because it was set with the reciprocal, it automatically put Charlie left goes to Delta. So it's kind of helping you out, but it also, I think probably what happened, it can be confusing if you're not sure what, especially like with the having the confusion about the fixed position. So
no, that's clear now. That's much clearer.
Okay, so that's the idea, and we have a whole nother video about this, and I'm again happy to go over more of it. I just that's the idea, the key thing. And now when I show here, it's showing up, and if I hit right, you'll see I go to Bravo. I keep going right. Now because of the reciprocal navigation, I only really set up the navigation on I think 2 sides, Bravo and Delta, but I had it set so that it set up the arrows. It would when I it set it up so that it seems that it works okay to navigate across the whole thing. I set it up on Bravo, left to go Charlie, right to go to Alpha, and then it set up automatically the link on Alpha to go left to Bravo. You notice a link here, right to go Delta. That got automatically set up because when we were setting the navigation for Delta, I was saying left goes to Alpha and right goes to Charlie, and because of the reciprocal navigation, it set up those links on the Alpha and Charlie side. So again, you can check out the video about navigation. Hopefully that clears up a lot of things about navigation. You can use these other arrows. Essentially, you can use the arrows for anything that you want. And you can use the up and down and everything. And using that reciprocal is the way that you turn things. If you want it to set up the opposite direction, you can let that reciprocal on. If you don't want it to set up the opposite, you turn it off. So for example, let's say I actually have a new location here, which is going to be my arrival. Let's say I have an arrival here and I set the background, and I'll set, let's say, let me just say I'm going to arrive at, doesn't really matter here, this arrival here. Now what I can do here is I won't copy any of the assets over, but now what I can do is say set navigation for arrival. Now for arrival, I may not want to go back to the arrival place, so I can turn reciprocal off. Let me say forward is going to go to Alpha. So now what happens is that when I actually am at arrival, I'll get the forward arrow, but when I get to Alpha, I'm not giving them a chance to go back to the arrival, to the staging, for whatever reason. Maybe I don't want them to. So I'm over here and I play the sim. I get the forward arrow here goes to Alpha, but now there's no way to go back to the arrival, short of restarting the scenario. Now actually, even if I reset the scenario here, it's going to Alpha as the start. So this is where that initial location I mentioned before comes in. If I want to make this my arrival, let me also go here and add some simple text here. I'm going to say there's some simple text, and I'm going to say this is going to be you've arrived or something. And I'm going to go here, you arrived there. I'm increasing that. I hit done. Now what I can do here is in the manage locations, I can say where normally A was the initial one, I can set the arrival. Click on arrival and set this one as the initial. It says replace A with arrival as default location. Yes. So now when I'm done with this, and I hit play, I've arrived, and now I can go forward, and now I can do my loop. But if I now reset my simulation, you'll see it starts at the arrival location. It's changed the initial location.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of something that if you want to have, you don't necessarily want those arrows to be like if I had not had reciprocal. If I had reciprocal, when I said Alpha here goes forward, it would have automatically put the down arrow going back to arrival. And for whatever reason, I decided to show you that I didn't want to have that. So one thing we may also see here in the arrival for Windows and Mac version is the keyboard. When I actually have like this up arrow here, I can use, if you look on your keyboard, there's Q, W, E, D, C, X, Z. It sort of forms, it's these 8 keys. If I click the W key, that's the up arrow. Now if I click the D key, that's the right arrow. And if I click the left key, the A, that's the left arrow. So there's ways to navigate with the keyboard here rather than actually clicking on the arrows. In some situations, you may even want to hide the arrows. and that you'll see that more in the progression, condition progression video. So if I'm going to show the menu here, we have something here you can hide the arrows completely and then navigate completely by keystrokes. And you don't have to actually have the menu there either. So the menu's always there. I mean, so but it's just hidden, it's just invisible. The last thing here, when you hide that arrow, let me show this thing again so you can show the menu. When you hide the arrow, there is one other thing. This is for mobile, where it's called tap regions. If I click Show Tap Regions, you'll see the screen gets divided into 10 segments. And those segments are clickable. When the navigation arrow is hidden, if I click on the section, just click on the screen in the appropriate place, it navigates. And this is, you may want to do this for convenience, or also if you wanted to go somewhere you didn't want your students to see where you're going, and that's going to be for condition progression. But so you have the tap regions as well as, and the show tap region just reminds you where the dividers are, as well as keyboard shortcuts for the Windows and Mac version. So that gives you a sense of now I'm just holding off right now. Let me go back to show you, where is it? There it is. Okay, I'm going back to our progression here. We've talked about some of the edit play options, multiple locations. I want to show you where Sims are. That way if you're copying between platforms, and again on the support site we show how to transfer Sims from computer to computer, or for mobile to computer and things like that as a manual process. If I go over to, let me open up my documents here. When you're working in Windows and Mac, you'll see in your documents folder there is a SimsUshare folder that gets created. Inside of SimsUshare you'll see a Sims folder, and inside that is where your actual simulations are stored as each individual folder. So again, we have documentation, but essentially you copy the simulation folder to the other computer, and that's how it gets that's how it gets put into the other computer. So if I actually now go here and let's say I have EX1 and I'm copying this into something here, let's say I call this one EX2. This is coming from another computer. Now when I open up SimsUshare, let me actually go back over here. Actually, let me close SimsUshare, and I will now. I'm gonna close SimsUshare and reopen it. And what I'm going to show you now, this is what SimsUshare shows you when it's actually seen, when it sees something. It's found a new one. I didn't change the name. I changed the folder EX1. Found it. So should I add it? And if I click yes, add it. Now it will actually, the name is going to be the same, EX1, because I was just copying. But the idea is when you copy it from someone else's, once you put it into that document SimsUshare folder, it will then, SimsUshare, when you open it again, will recognize it. And we have another video about copying and locations and everything like that, because you can also, on Windows and Mac, change the location of where your simulations are stored.
Now you have people on the forum that are sharing their Sims. Does it matter? Are they cross-platform?
Yeah, they're all cross-platform. So if someone has that, they download these things. It'll work on Android, iOS, Windows, or Mac.
Wow.
So let's see. So, oh, thank you. We're very proud. Let's go back over to copying Sims, and again, more information. We did timing. I'm going to hold off masking, condition progression, victim control. We actually, I've got a scenario, a talk in 2 weeks about using victims. I mean, victims are something. I'll just kind of go in quickly into that, but the idea of you can put things up there and then click to get rid of them, or double click to uncover them, and there's actually ways to make victims move around the house. Again, with the fade in, fade out type of thing. With victims can show up in one, let's say, can show up at a window for 10 seconds, and then maybe 15 seconds later they're on the floor inside in another room, and they all can be coordinated. So that's an interesting way, a little more advanced. The masking is tricky. I want to sort of end this talk. I know we're a little bit out. It's about 15 minutes right now. Have you tried masking, Paul? Are you you want?
Yes, actually, I'm very comfortable with masking. That's
Oh.
something that for some reason came very easily.
Okay, oh, that's terrific. That's good. I mean, we like to hear that. I mean, again, we like to hear feedback because it tells us where the important points are, and also where where there might be any issues. So, you know, we certainly like to hear feedback about good and bad, and like your good suggestions about the attachment. We'll certainly add that to our list. So
Actually,
just
another thing I was curious, because I've actually played around with this with some of the guys,
Mhm.
is we'll generally have a clock running a lot of time. That's another thing that I'm kind of surprised that you don't have. I didn't know if there was a reason why you didn't have an elapsed time clock available.
No, we just haven't. Certainly, that's a great suggestion. It's pretty easy to add. I mean, you know, we have our scenario time, so it'd be fairly straightforward to add it. I'll put that suggestion in, and that's something be great to be able to have.
Because sometimes just having the clock adds pressure, which is good, and it's also good for benchmarks.
Good. That's a good suggestion. Great. So in terms of masking, let me just go over, since this is recorded and we had a special section. There's another video on masking. I forget if that's coming up. That may be coming up, or if we've recorded already. But the key idea here, if we want to mask something, let me go into alpha, and let me just add in some smoke. So I'm going to go here as a smoke over here. So the idea of masking is to be able to cut off parts of the smoke so it looks like the smoke is behind the building, or maybe through a window or something. So actually, let's move the smoke over here. It'd be interesting. The key idea with masking, and I'm going to go here, utility, mask. So the mask is shows a little diamond there. When we're in the regular edit mode, meaning we have to select an element, there's this big diamond because it's a little hard to select the line itself. So that's why we made this sort of rotated square. Now this mask also can go above and below things, but it really doesn't matter the relative order of it. It always will mask. It will always apply to the things you tell it to, regardless of its visual order. It's always good to keep it up near the top, but it really doesn't matter functionally where it is. So what I'm doing here is, if I go here, once I click on the mask, now again I can make it bigger or smaller. I can now go here and say what to mask. I have to tell it, just because there's a mask, it doesn't know what to actually block out. So I say what to mask, and all the things that have not been part of masks already get listed here. So if you have another element that's being masked, it won't show up in this list. So if I go here and I say mask the gray turbulent, one over here, now when I go and I actually play this, you'll see it's cutting out. You see how it cuts out the part it's masking, that gray turbulent. Now, one small thing, as we're talking about masking, it may be confusing the gray turbulent A, gray turbulent B. When you're editing an element, you can explore the menus. You'll see actually inside here, you can even, once you're editing the element, you can rename the element. So I could call this one, instead of gray turbulent, I could call this first floor smoke, whatever. So now it's called first floor smoke. It's a little more meaningful when you're doing, especially when you have a lot of stuff on there, to remember what's one, what's two. You can rename the element. Now if I click on the mask here, again, the mask is going to be applying what do I want to mask. And there's first floor smoke. If I now, I'm going to actually now some of the other options here, not only what to mask, but I'm going to say mask boundary. So this is where now I actually can go and drag. I create the boundary of what I want to mask. And now this is also where hide other elements is useful. If I hide other elements, I can now see like my roof line. Now I can't quite get this with 4 points. I can always add other points. I hit plus and I click near another point, and now I can basically add in more points. So now I can create my mask to where I want it to be. So now when I actually play, I didn't do a very good job there. I must not have. I did an okay job. Let's see. Oh, you know, I bet because I scaled it, that probably is there. It probably is not supposed to be scaled. Anyway, It shouldn't have had that scaling. Let's see if this will. Yeah. Okay. So I thought the scaling. That's something I have to check out. But so over here we're masking, and you can see how it's cut off this, and now we have. We actually now have it. So you're cut off there. Now the other thing about masking is that we can mask both what is outside this shape. So if I go here, see I'm cutting this stuff off outside the shape. There was another option here that said mask type, and mask type is actually whether I want to. This is going to let me block stuff off outside this. But if I click on this mask type to be portal, now I'm actually going to cut off stuff outside the shape. So you'll see the difference here between the portal. Now you'll see this is a way, like if I wanted to constrain the smoke to inside a window, all I have to do is go, let's say I want to make this just inside this window. Let me, I change the mask boundary. Let me reset this also. This is the reset thing. The square, if I click reset, it resets the points. If I now just click on these points here, I will now be able to reset it just to that window. Let me hide that there so I can see it more clearly. And now there, I'm done with that. So now if I press play, I'm just masking inside the window. And when I'm doing things inside the window, maybe I want to make the opacity a little less so it looks like it's through the window. So if I'm going to go here and bring that there, I'm going to set the opacity something lighter. Let me also bring in some flames, because that's I'll bring in some basic fire. I'll put it in the window as well. It's just sort of overlapping the window. And now when if I click on the mask, I can go here and say which to mask, and I'm going to include the basic fire. So now it's masking both the first floor smoke and the basic fire. And I'm going to hit done. So it's not completely obscured. I'm going to take the basic fire and set the opacity down. So I'm there. And now I'm able to, well, you can't really see the smoke too well, but you see that the fire and the smoke are being masked. So again, this is just a very brief introduction to masking. The last thing I'll mention about masking is that those points, if I actually go and select the mask, and I hit which to mask, I hit mask boundary, I can actually click on a point and now move it with my cursor on Windows and Mac. I don't have to just move it with my pointer, with the mouse. So I can get more fine control by clicking with the arrows. Again, that's sort of a whirlwind through masking, and we'll have a special webinar about masking just in itself. But condition progression, we have the other video about making things, and victim control, we'll have the next webinar about that. So I want to thank you very much. At this point, I thank you for your attention and good questions. Do you have any further questions before we kind of wrap this up?
No, not for this. I have been viewing the forums and the YouTube videos, and I haven't dared tackle the integrating it into a PowerPoint presentation yet. I think that's my next foray. Okay.
Well, that it may be maybe now Jim being on the line doing some kind of pre-fire planning. That's a great suggestion for a future webinar. Because that integrating different things, and maybe that's putting it in PowerPoint. So we definitely will make note of that, and so you should, we'll see something as we move forward. I'm going to stop the recording.
Idea about integration into PowerPoint. If I may go back to navigation,
yes,
it may seem a little confusing at the front end, but Jonathan's a pretty humble guy. What he's done is genius, Paul, with regard to the navigation and the reciprocal components. If you think about building 5 or 6 simulations and you had to navigate each individual arrow, essentially what he's able to accomplish is decrease your time by 50%, because once you navigate from alpha side to Bravo side, that reciprocal is automatically built in for you, saving you time so you haven't got to navigate each individual arrow. So if that helps, I hope it does, but it really meant a lot to me. And it works very nicely.
Oh, absolutely. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan of this whole product. I mean, it's
Thank
absolutely
you.
phenomenal what it's able to do, and it just seems to be growing in capability every version.
Yeah, we're trying. The key thing for us, we want to also make sure it does not grow in complexity, the sort of walk up intuitiveness. That's the thing. So we want to be careful about, not confusing things, but on the downside there, some things may be a little bit more hidden to be uncovered.